Thank you everyone for joining. Appreciate the time you've taken out of your day today to attend. I'd like to begin by acknowledging the traditional audience owners of the land on which we meet, paying our respects to elders past and present. Today we have a panel of speakers who you can see on the screen. There we are, we've got the agenda up now. You can see panels of speakers on the screen, which will be addressing the effects of architecture on the education environment and how it can impact the learning experience.
From an academic perspective, given our topic of architecture for education, I'd like to focus firstly on the role of the university, which is in two-part, education of students and through student projects and through the conduct of research, and in particular funded research into various aspects of inquiry and with a focus on architecture. And there are a number of imperatives in terms of architecture, and probably the most prevalent in recent times is design for health and well-being. And I think this sits really well in terms of school environments, but also extending that to other environments such as hospitals and other places of public gathering. And so design for health and well-being particularly focuses around environmental quality, aspects of interiority, how our internal environments are designed, and sensory design, light, sound, acoustics, and then taking that onto aspects of color and materials. These are all elements which come together, which we could arguably say to create good design, good architecture, and with a view to particularly the focus of materials, how sensitive design can achieve environments of health and well-being. My background screen is one slide, and it's a student project for an intergenerational learning and living campus. This is an emerging idea about how we can bring together seniors and youth in terms of meaningful and directed and intentional campus design and precinct design. We all know that schools and senior living, retirement villages are separate, and there's a movement nationally and indeed worldwide to find solutions to bringing this together. So here's an example of I guess a new co-location of a school with senior living and housing. And this was an experiment undertaken by undergraduate students at Deakin University. But also it's a national research project as well, which is currently underway. So it's an example of how, from a university point of view, education and research can come together and inform each other. And if I was to take that a step further, and once again from a university perspective, really invite our industry colleagues in this webinar to consider the collaborations around various inquiries which you might have from both practice and industry, in which the university can form partnerships, and we can attempt to resolve various issues. So in terms of either research and development, and there's a very important government scheme which supports such activities, which is an Innovation Connections grant scheme, which supports funding in terms of bringing university and industry together. This was such a fund which initiated the intergenerational learning and living campus as well. So these things kind of all connect, and really the message is how we can work together across sectors to pursue some of the issues. So in conclusion, to tackle our societal challenges and problems, we need to develop meaningful partnerships between industry and university. And I look forward to seeing the outcomes of the discussion, and certainly available to approach any of these issues should we wish. So thank you very much.
Michael Phillips, who's founder of Michael Phillips Acoustics. He's an acoustic engineer and has vast experience across projects of all sizes, including the educational spaces. So I'll be head over to you, Michael, when you're ready.
G'day, thanks, Liana. So yeah, today in the brief 5 minutes I've got here, just looking to just go over some of the typical considerations that we had just from an acoustics perspective, just in relation to education. So what we do is we need to work very collaboratively with the architect, also as well with the manufacturers such as Supawood. So what we're looking at is, see that we've got the dot points up, so is any form of external noise intrusions, with noise generated by building services, noise transfer between spaces, so that would be airborne and impact, and also we probably hear a lot of is reverberation and control of echoes. So essentially what that looks like is would usually be looking at this sort of thing in the design stages, just so we can essentially assist with making sure that it's a smooth process and we don't have to have any changes down the track. So in relation to external noise intrusions, that can be things such as road traffic, rail and aircraft. And what we're looking at there is the design of the facade and your facade constructions, glazing and things like that, which might have an impact on the noise levels from external coming internal and affecting the inner spaces. Your building services noise intrusions, things such as ventilation, air conditioning services, plumbing services as well. So we're looking at things like that, and yet again in the design stages, so we're reviewing all of those things to again ensure that that the internal noise levels will be where they need to be according to the correct standards, which again we draw from many different standards. We don't actually have one particular standard that we work off across the board in Australia, which can make things a little bit more challenging. With other places overseas, they do have one standard across the board, where we're drawing from different standards. So it makes it a little bit more challenging for us to have to draw things from different places. But yeah, we essentially get through that, but it's early collaboration. It's how we do it. As well, noise transfer between spaces. So we're thinking about between classrooms, the function of the space. One might be a learning area, another might be a music room, or you've got a hall or sports areas. So we need to consider the airborne noise transfer and impacts. So airborne can be things like speech and music. Impact can be things like footfall, chairs scraping over hard surfaces. So how we go about mitigating those noises, we're looking at the construction details, and how to put together the walls, and knowing what's on one side of the wall to the other, or through the floors, and then what acoustic measures we can put in place to help with the internal noise levels there. And then reverberation and control of echoes is probably the most common acoustical thing that we'd be hearing about. So obviously we've all been in a room where there's too much echo, and it's reverberant noise, and it's obviously is significant repercussions in rooms such as that, and cause all sorts of health issues for teachers and delayed learning for students. So we need to ensure that each room has appropriate reverberation control. Another thing as well, where we look at control of echoes, we do that through placement of materials. So there's one thing thinking about, we've got our reverberation control panels, but we're also looking at where we can put those panels. So the architectural finishes there, and essentially we're looking at doing things like avoiding any hard surface parallel walls, or you can have long delayed echoes if you have a solid wall that's over a particular distance. So we need to look out for things like that, just to enhance speech intelligibility to where it needs to be in the learning spaces. So again, yeah, just reinforcing, we always want to prepare early with acoustics. We work off what the design intent is from the architect or the designer, making sure that, we can implement our discipline into what they're trying to do. So we're essentially providing a support role to the architect design. It's the way we like to look at it. So it's, again, if we're things like if there's lots of hard surfaces like glazing and plasterboard and things like that, we'll have to bring up early that different finishes, such as perforated panels and timber linings and things like that can assist with controlling the acoustics inside. So again, that's covered with characteristics of room surfaces and the finishes. Again, positioning will also assist. Looking at open plan spaces, which is a common thing in education these days. As collaborative as they are, they can also bring up a number of acoustical ramifications, which aren't so great. So we need to do some strategic placements where we can look at creating zones and spaces that wouldn't disrupt other spaces, because it's much more difficult when we don't have a partition. Again, we're looking at the floor plan, room sizes and geometries as well, because that all has an effect. So really, what we're further to press what we're looking at is we just want to prepare early, have design meetings with the architects and really factor all of that in. And then down the track when we're working, it's when the builders and architects and users knowing when to ask a question of us, really, for us to review things to make sure that we'll achieve those acoustic goals. So yeah, that's about it for me in that time period.
No, thank you, Michael. That acoustic background's very interesting. Next, we're going to dive into our real life case study. So the Knox Grammar Performing Arts Centre project. Damien Jones, who's with us today from NVRS Architecture, is going to speak to his own experience as architect on the project and his experience with similar spaces. Damien, look forward to hearing what you have to say.
Thanks, Liana, and thanks, Michael, for what you've said. It was all quite sounding familiar in relationship to a lot of the work that we do in architecture. There's a lot of technical components in that, and part of our job is getting that looking very simple and elegant in our overall design, amongst other things. So the project we're looking at today is the Knox Grammar School, Junior School Academy and the Performing Arts Centre. I've had the benefit of doing work in youth and community work as well as in architecture and being able to bring some of those together. In NVRS, we're really focusing on creating life-changing environments, not just in education, but also in other areas of the industry. This particular project with Knox Grammar School was a real combination of performing arts spaces and classrooms, music classrooms. So the school's brief, they were needing a state-of-the-art facility that provided those performing arts spaces at a professional level, and the ability for their students to be able to be taught in the performing arts, in music, drama, etc., but also have that connection with at a professional level. So it's been quite a challenge in that. Part of the challenges we looked at were the fire separation, as you do with different classes of building, but particularly the acoustics. And I'm sure from what you heard from Michael, it gave you a bit of an indication on some of those challenges. Now, if we go to the next slide, please. This is a typical music classroom that we worked with the school and PKA Acoustics. So we're looking at all the glazing, at our wall finishes, etc., to be able to provide an acoustic space that worked as a room, but also didn't impact on adjacent rooms. If we go to the next slide, please. This is effectively a fan-shaped room in plan, a fan-shaped room for orchestra rehearsal. It's only 3 or 4 metres away from the classroom we just looked at. So the acoustic treatment in this space was critical, and part of that is on the ceiling. You might be able to see the Supawood super slats that will be used. Again, PKA's design in consideration with other acoustic components helped to really lift this space to work acoustically for the orchestra rehearsals. The next slide, please. Now, this space here, it's the lobby, the main lobby that connects internal to the main performing space of the facility, but also it connects the side of the building that has all of our classrooms. So it's critical in looking at the acoustics of this space so that the education and performance work together. Our acoustics didn't clash from between those two spaces. So you can see on the curved wall there, we've got the Supawood Superline cladding as it wraps around just as a part of the acoustic treatment of this space. And being able to work with the acoustic consultant and the school, it doubled up as an art display along that curved wall as well, if and when the school needed to do that. But it really helped to set up each of the spaces, set up the performing arts space, set up the classrooms, so we didn't have any clash of our acoustics from one space to another. The next slide, please. Okay. We'll come to a photo in a moment of this. Within the main performing space itself, on the mezzanine level, we had to design an acoustic treatment for the balustrade, which you can see on the right-hand side here. That's the balustrade in section. So we worked with PKA Acoustics and Supawood to develop the design of this balustrade to achieve our acoustic considerations, but also you can see the dashed line there of an access panel to give access to the theatre lighting that was located underneath the Supawood lining. So if we just go to the next slide, please. So there we go. So you can see that curved balustrade on the left as it's curving away to the other side. It's about 20 metres long. So it was quite a feat to construct the concrete beam, let alone the Supawood balustrade going across over the top. And you can see the little rectangular segments on the top. They're the access panels that gave access to the lighting. In the distance, you can see on the far wall, you can see some of the sound reflectors that were designed with PK Acoustics and ourselves, developing a one-off design that achieved the acoustics, but it also complemented the architecture in the space, providing a space for the professional performances, but also for the education of the students. So the next slide, please. So as we work through the details with PKA Acoustics, coming up with this design, we work closely with Supawood throughout the design phase, but also construction, to make sure that we achieved our compliances with the fire compliances and also the acoustic performances, as well as our architectural intent. The next slide, please. So just another photo, as you can see, from the ground floor in the main performance space. I was there on the opening night and the school we had performances from the orchestra, from drama and from the choral, and you could just about hear a pin drop as the acoustics just worked so well. And I'd have to say it would be largely due to the side panels that have been provided there in the Supawood Superline, but just the design, the importance of having an acoustic consultant as a part of these projects. So it's been exciting to be a part of this, and I think we'll hear a bit from the school in terms of how they've experienced these spaces in a moment. Thanks, Liana.
No, thank you, Damien. That's probably an excellent segue into our next section. James Bryce, who is the head of performing arts at the Knox Grammar School, was due to speak with us today, but unfortunately has had to pull out early this morning due to sickness. He has provided me a testimonial to read out on his behalf. which I'll just run through now. There we go, he's got a few of the images himself. So he's written, the fit out from Supawood in our Knox Grammar School Theatre, Junior Academy and Performing Arts Centre is truly first class. The look and feel of the centre has and continues to be tremendously exciting for our students, staff and audiences who enter and experience presentations and performances. In addition to the beautiful and highly attractive aesthetic qualities, with attractive colour tones, angles and design, the look and feel created is exciting, neat, clean, classy and very professional. With an objective of creating both a theatre and a concert hall, the brief was challenging for all concerned. However, the exceptional design from Supawood has achieved our requirements brilliantly. As the head of performing arts and conductor of our symphony orchestra and symphonic wind ensemble, the acoustic qualities of resonance, clarity, warmth, projection and definition, both for the performance on stage and also for the audience, was paramount in the success of the fit out. Similarly, when in theatre production mode, with our actors on the stage and musicians in our orchestra pit, the experience for our audience is everything you hope for in professional theatre. I'm exceptionally pleased with the quality and flexibility of the acoustic and aesthetic fit out. So again, it is unfortunate that James couldn't be with us. However, glad to hear the positive feedback from him. A link to James's video testimonial will also be provided in the white paper released at the end of the week. If anyone who'd like to hear further from James. Next up, we have Robert McBride and Debbie Ryan, founders of McBride Charles Ryan Architects, and they'll share their knowledge and give us an overview of their participation in a next case study project, which was the Penley and Essendon Grammar School Gymnasium. Thank you, Debbie and Rob.
Thanks, Liana.
Thank you.
So, hello. The project that we're profiling is the latest of a series of projects we've undertaken at the Penley and Essendon Grammar Senior Campus at East Keilor. For over 10 years, we've worked with the school to develop a series of learning neighbourhoods for the different school cohorts. Each of these neighbourhoods have been tailored around the learning requirements of those particular students. The project is the first building that serves the whole of the school, and while it is called the gymnasium, it is more than that. It is a centre of physical education, as well as a meeting place and a performance space, which can accommodate the whole of the school and can seat up to 3,500 people. It is an important symbolic place, and we think of it as being the town hall or the civic centre. Supawood was an important product that assisted us in meeting the functional, performative and symbolic requirements of this important building. Next.
So this is just the front of the school, just to give you some indication of the architecture. That idea that we wanted that this was kind of like the town hall for the whole of the school was important. And this sort of colonnade space, which really came out of trying to get the fixed tier seating in the project. And this sort of thematic was something that we brought into the interior of the space in a moment, which you'll see.
Yeah, so we've just listed the products that were used, which were used in this building. So there's a Superline timber ceiling panel, the Super Finish dark silver ash, Superline acoustic timber ceiling panel, the silver ash super veneer, that's the natural veneer, and the super acoustic PLK perforated acoustic timber ceiling panel, which is the Super Finish dark silver ash. So the natural veneer was used in the reception and the other products were used in the gymnasium. The primary space is the new gym hall. The new floor was located at the level of the old gym, allowing ground level tiered seating to surround two sites. Skylights we added to increase natural lighting, but also played an important part in both the fire strategy through smoke exhaust and early morning purging of the gym when necessary. The Supawood coffers worked in conjunction with the skylights to provide a dramatic vaulted space. This drama most clearly evident on the upper tiers of the project. I think we might have a slightly different one, but maybe.
Yeah, so I mean, in the construction of the vaults, all of the suspended construction system was prefabricated. And prior to the documentation, we worked closely with Supawood to determine what was the capacity of curvature in their product. We go to the next slide, which I'm not sure what it is. Yeah, these are just some of the shop drawings that we developed the main vaulting throughout the gymnasium space, so that it could be prefabricated. There was a lot of work that we worked through with Supawood in the early stages to make sure that we could achieve this, because it was a central, important part of the project itself, an important part of conveying that sense of the town hall and providing a space which is not just a gymnasium, but is kind of like a space that is quite elevating and inspiring.
I suppose sort of a main thing that we try to do as a firm is, particularly with education well, actually all of our buildings, but particularly education buildings, I suppose, for this particular school, is to basically stir the imagination. So we want the building to do the work as well.
So these are some of the early images. So these are the early images that we presented to the school. And I think one also thing that we do as a firm is we try and deliver what we promised to the school. So it was important that we didn't lose this concept, and it was important that we work with Supawood that we could achieve it within the budget itself.
Yeah, I'll just, it's always very important to us, the colours, the finishes. I mean, it has to perform from an acoustic and a fire rating point of view, but it's also, it's an aesthetic space.
Yeah, so I think there were three main drivers in the vaulting. One of them was that they hid the main structural trusses. They also had the heating. So the heating is run when is in performance mode. They would use the heater. They don't use it from day to day, but that contains all the ducting for the heating. And of course, the acoustic attenuation was important in the space. And that was a tricky balance between getting a space that would work as a gymnasium, but would also work as a performance. So a very sort of tricky acoustic compromise, if you like.
So the frames wrap around the large structural steel trusses of the gym and house the ducting for the facility's heating. This heating is used generally only when there are large gatherings and performances, and not on a day-to-day basis. Because we figure if you're playing basketball and things like that, you don't really need it. The vaults also perform an important acoustic function to reduce the reverberation throughout the space. Because of the multifunction of the space, balancing the acoustics was an important part of the project.
And one of the things I think was interesting in the project is that our acoustic engineer, which was Stantec, I think they did a good job of balancing the different needs. But one of the things they couldn't model was the effect of the curvature. And so there was a bit of speculation and rule of thumb about how that would perform in the project, which I think was interesting. And Michael might want to comment on that at some stage.
Yeah. Next, please. Just some of the construction shots. So you can see some of those acoustic panels being installed. Importantly, you can see that these finished images, the very close correlation between the concept images presented to the school and the finished project. Basically, what we showed them is what got delivered. So, we were really happy with that, and so was the school. I don't know how we're going.
Thank you, Leanne.
Yeah, I don't know how we're going for time, but yeah, we're a bit over. Sorry, Liana. Thank you.
No, that's all right. Thanks for sharing your experience on that one. Sorry, the malfunction with the slides happening here. We'll try and get them up and running better for the next one. So our final speaker is Richard Hardwick, the National Specifications Manager for Supawood. Richard's going to give us a brief overview on the Supawood Dreams to Reality project concept. Take it away, Richard.
That'll work. Okay, thank you, Liana. And thank you to all the panellists. These were great presentations. What we've seen here today is how design and acoustics plays such a critical role in establishing an environment that impacts on the emotional, mental and physical well-being for both students and teachers alike. How this has a ripple effect into the broader community. I can speak to this on a personal basis because my wife's a teacher. Within a learning environment, if you have poor acoustics, you have poor outcomes for the students, okay? And for the teachers, they have to manage those environments. So if they're competing with a lot of noise, that noise is not being managed, there are poor outcomes for everyone. Now, what you saw with these two project examples was some striking geometries. This is, of course, the design of Damien, Debbie and Rob, in their respective projects. And if you saw how striking those designs were, well, they're working on a number of levels. Now, what we critically do, Supawood critically do, because we based our business model on the requirements of architects, and this goes back 22 years ago. We sat down with Damiens, the Debbies and the Roberts within the design communities and said, what do you want? And to take you from your dream, bring that into reality, is a consideration. So one of the important things that we do is we go through a process of discovery right at the beginning with the architect to understand exactly what they're trying to achieve with their design intent, and what the program needs are. So it's not just understanding what the architect wants, it's also understanding what the builder requires. Now, say for instance, with Damien's project, what we discovered when we met with the builder was their concern about the framing behind the panels that were on the wall. So once we discovered that, we removed that pain point by incorporating the framing within the panel supply. So we took care of that connection detail. So what I'm saying to you here, it's no good in having a design intent unless you can build it. And we always critically explore that. How do we build this? And we make it understandable for the builder. Because once you remove that pain point, remove the objection from the builder from a practical sense. There's no sense in having the buildability unless you've got the compliances. I'll just continue.
Yeah,
okay, so
continue.
All right, so we've got a vision from the architect. No sense in being able to having that vision unless you can build it. No sense in being able to build that unless it complies. And we are known for this. We will always discover what the compliances are, and there are a number of compliances that you have to consider in these projects. It's not just the acoustics, but it's the group fire rating, etc. And in terms of the execution of these sort of projects, one of the things that we critically do is undertake the workshop drawings for the builder. And what the builder essentially gets to the site is a giant kit with the fixings. So they're not essentially having to think about it, they're just following the numbers. Number one to the working set, number one to the kit, number one to the frame. And they follow the sequence that we've laid out for them. And what that does, that speeds up the execution of the project. And the overall impact that this has for everyone is that we bring it in to the budget. So if everybody is time poor, so if you can eliminate time on site, you can achieve that. All right, well, that's enough from me, so thank you very much.
Thank you, Richard. And I'm sorry, everyone, for the noise issue there. Unfortunately, we didn't have Paul jump on at the start. He was our professor from Western Sydney University who was going to speak around the generic topic of architecture in education. So we'll look to get a bit from what he was going to say and include that in our white paper going out later in the week also. We did start a little bit late, but did have a few minutes for a couple of Q&A questions that did come in. Richard, I understand your mic setup might not be ideal, but we did have one that might be appropriate to yourself on the dreams to reality process, which was, are you only acoustic compliant?
Okay,
See how the
thanks
mic
for that.
goes.
All right.
Try
Okay.
to keep it short.
Thanks for that question. No, we look at a number of compliances. So we meet all compliances, not just acoustics, but group fire ratings for internals, non-combustibility, where it's required for the external walls. We also meet seismic compliance, and we are a sustainable company. So we are Green Star licensed. And in saying that, we also undertake LEED, NABERS, L. So we meet all sustainability compliances. So in short, there is a number of compliances that we look at when we look at each project, no matter the scale.
Thanks, Richard. We didn't have too many come into the Q&A box. I'm just looking now. Michael, we did have 2 for you though. So I've got, in an open plan learning space, how do you stop sound travelling from one side of the space to the other side when you have more than one group in the space? I'm guessing that's different learning sections.
So we can't really stop the sound. Unless you use something like an operable wall, which is always an option. But if that can't be done, or for other reasons, for sight lines and whatnot, you just want to manage the sound. And how we achieve that is reducing the reverberation time as far as practicable. So using very high NRC absorbing products, and also minimizing any overhead reflections, because with speech, if you want to create a zone, if you've got an overhead reflection, then the speech can travel over to the next zone. So that's how we'll do that. So very high absorbing products on the ceiling. So essentially a project that Supawood's done there is with, I think it was a maxi beam with very high absorbing acoustic bats behind it, and we were able to achieve that in an open plan. I can't remember which project it was specifically, but that's how you go about that.
Okay, thanks for that. There was one more that came up and probably links a bit. You spoke about reverberation and echoes in your segment at the start. The question is, what are the best panels or linings for good acoustics in education spaces?
Okay, so that's the best panel and lining is what, a couple of things to determine. It'll just be what's suited to the space. So each space, depending on the function of the space, will require a different acoustic rating. Usually I always like to think from a position of sight first, again, collaboratively with the architect, and we do have the ability to engineer the finishes to absorb at different frequencies depending on how the rest of the space is designed. So for instance, if there's a lot of carpet in the space, that will have a lot of excessive high frequency absorption. Same with a lot of fabric panels. So in a space like that, timber works quite well because it's more absorbing the lower and the mid frequencies. Whereas if you've got hard floors, then you might want to put some soft finishes around. But again, it depends on the function of the space, how much absorbing you need to be done. So again, like when we talked about with open plan versus say a traditional learning classroom, where you do want to have some reinforcement of speech, which could be off the back walls and the ceiling to project the voice into the classroom, that would require something different. So again, in short, I'd say the best thing is what works for the design, and then up to the acoustic engineer to really engineer it bespoke from there. So depends.
Yeah, thank you, Michael. Yeah, that's very good. We were trying to wrap up within our 40-minute time frame. We did start a little late, but if there are any other further questions in the Q&A box, we were going to capture those and answer them later in our white paper at the end of the week. So thank you for your Q&A answer input there. I'm sorry the struggles with the slides here, but thank you to all the panellists for your time today and coming on and answering people's questions. A recording of the webinar will be made available along with the white paper we've discussed. We'll get that out to you as soon as possible. I'd like to encourage you to share this with colleagues or anyone who you think would find the content valuable. Thank you again for joining, and all the best.